There were 11 boxes left. The bedroom light was the wrong color for what was happening. Too warm, too amber, the kind that makes ordinary things look important. Nadia Marsh had been in my apartment for 6 hours, had wrapped half my kitchen in newspaper with the efficiency of someone who had made decisions like this many times before, and now stood in my near-empty bedroom without her cardigan, which she had never once been without in 4 years of knowing her, and looked at the bare floor where my bed frame used to be. Then she pointed at the center of the room. "Which side is mine?" She said it too casually, too deliberately flat. The way someone speaks when they have rehearsed the casual out of a sentence so many times it sounds almost natural. Almost. I had packed 3 apartments in my life and never once had my manager show up with tape and an opinion about it. I had certainly never had one look at the part of my floor where I sleep and make a quiet decision about it out loud. And yet, here we were. My name is James Calloway. I'm 34. For 4 years I worked as a project coordinator at a mid-size consultancy called Rendell Group, which sounds more impressive at dinner parties than it functions in daily life. My job was to be the person other people called when a project was either on fire or one bad email away from it. I was good at it. I kept a notebook, made coffee that was better than what the office machine produced, and had an apparently uncommon talent for sitting in rooms where everyone was panicking without adding to the volume. I lived alone in a 1-bedroom in the warehouse district. I had a rubber plant on the windowsill that had survived 3 years on inconsistent watering and what I suspect was pure spite. I didn't have a dog. I didn't have a standing social calendar. I had the plant, the notebook, and a very reliable takeout rotation from 3 places that knew my order. Nadia Marsh was my direct manager and had been for the entirety of those 4 years. She was 38. She ran the project management division at Rendell, 11 people, including me, with the particular kind of authority that doesn't announce itself. She wore the same small navy cardigan every single day at the office. In 4 years, I had never once seen her without it indoors. She kept a pen tucked behind her ear, even when there was no paper anywhere in the vicinity. Her voice, when something was critical, dropped rather than rose. The quieter she got, the more carefully every person in the room listened. She had a way of remembering things people mentioned once. Not everything. Specific things. The kind of things you say when you're not expecting anyone to be paying attention. I had told myself, with some consistency, that this was what exceptional management looked like. I had told myself this approximately 200 times. The number had been climbing. We met the way people meet at Rendell. She interviewed me in a glass-walled conference room with a broken blind that rattled every time the HVAC cycled on. I was certain I had bombed it. She pushed my application through anyway. I found out a year later, mentioned at the end of a project retrospective, that it already run 90 minutes too long. "Why?" I'd asked. She looked up from her laptop. "Your answers were specific," she said. "Specific answers to bad questions are a good sign." Then she went back to the screen. I filed that away. I filed a lot of what Nadia said away. The existing dynamic between us was the kind that works precisely because neither person interrogates it. She was demanding. I delivered. I told her about problems before she had to discover them. She gave feedback that was short, correct, and never personal. We had developed a shorthand, a shared dry humor that lived in the margins of difficult weeks, in a raised eyebrow across a conference table, in a single line between the two of us while everyone else was still processing. I liked working with her. That was the honest version. The version I told myself was somewhat more practical. We worked well because we were compatible professionally. that the reason she was always the first person I wanted to tell when something went right was because she was my manager, and that was the appropriate direction of information. I was not a convincing liar, even to myself. But I had practice. I accepted a role at another firm in February. Director level, more responsibility, better pay, a title that wouldn't need explaining. The right move. Everyone agreed, including me. I gave notice on a Tuesday and felt, for approximately 12 hours, the clean relief of a good decision made. Then, Nadia called me into her office. The room smelled like cold coffee and carpet. She had my letter on her desk and did not look at it. "You submitted this to HR before you told me," she said. I thought it was cleaner. It wasn't. A pause. "Where are you moving?" I explained. The new firm was across the city, and I'd found an apartment closer to it. The plan was to pack the last weekend of March. My sister had offered but was visiting in-laws. A couple of friends had bailed. It would be fine. I'd done it before. Nadia was quiet for 4 seconds. "I'll come," she said. I waited for the qualifier. The sentence didn't have one. She arrived at 9 on a Saturday morning with a roll of packing tape and a coffee and a cup from a cafe that was not near my apartment, which meant she had gone out of her way for it. She had been to that cafe once, 6 months ago, when I mentioned it offhand mid-conversation, in a meeting about something else entirely. I had not believed she was fully listening. She had been listening. She had also not brought her cardigan. This was the first thing I noticed, before the coffee, before the tape. In 4 years, I had never seen her without it indoors. Here she was, in my apartment, in a plain gray shirt, and the absence of something I associated entirely with her felt like a detail I had no business cataloging as carefully as I was. I let it go. I had practice at that too. The apartment smelled like cardboard and old takeout menus, and the particular quality of air that only appears when you are preparing to leave a place. Late March light came through the kitchen window. Not quite warm yet, still deciding. The rubber plant sat in it with its usual pointed indifference to my circumstances. We started in the kitchen. She moved with the efficiency of someone accustomed to making decisions without announcing them. I packed the pantry. We didn't talk much at first. That was normal for us. Nadia had no interest in filling silence for the sake of it. Midway through the afternoon, she said, from across a box labeled books that I had made structurally questionable life choices with, "Why didn't you tell me about the offer before you accepted?" I kept my hands busy with the shelf. Would it have changed anything? She didn't answer for long enough that it meant something. "No," she said finally. "Probably not." That sentence did something quiet to the room. I left it there. I had poor survival instincts around certain kinds of honesty, and hers in particular. By 5 o'clock the living room was in boxes, the kitchen was mostly done, and I was sitting on a container marked fragile. Kitchen that was not structural, but held anyway. Nadia sat on the bare floor across from me, with her back against the wall, drinking from a water bottle she had thought to bring, and I had not. I had been telling myself, at regular intervals throughout the day, that this was a professional courtesy, that she was a thorough person who completed things. That her being here, on her Saturday, with tape she had bought herself, with coffee she had gone out of her way to source, was management style extended slightly past its natural boundary. I was doing a worse job of meaning it than usual. There is something disarming about someone in your actual space. Not the version of you that exists in offices and on calendars, but the real version, with the embarrassing quantity of notebooks and the survivor plant and the drawer of pens that don't work. She had been here for 7 hours. She had held my coffee mugs. She had seen the inside of my refrigerator and said nothing. which was a mercy. She had moved through my apartment like she had considered its geography carefully, and I had been watching this with more attention than I was being careful about hiding. I went to pack the bathroom. It seemed like appropriate busy work. The evidence, if I had been willing to call it that, had been accumulating for longer than one Saturday. In November, I had mentioned offhand, mid-debrief, not a personal conversation, that I hadn't taken a vacation day in 18 months. 2 weeks later, a printed calendar appeared on my desk with 3 days blocked, and a note that said, HR flags this as a liability. Take them. She was already gone when I looked up. I took the days. I went nowhere. The blocked calendar was still in my notebook. There had been the Morrison project, 6 weeks that had tried its level best to cost us 2 clients. The day it finally closed, after the sign-off call, after everyone had gone home, Nadia knocked on my open door and said, "You held it together. I want you to know I saw that." Then she left before I could respond. I had replayed that sentence approximately 35 times on the drive home. Long enough that I had stopped mentioning these moments to anyone else. Long enough that I'd built a private catalog of things she had said or done that I was not supposed to be storing this carefully. Long enough that by this particular Saturday, the catalog had begun to feel less like information and more like evidence of something I had been deliberately failing to name. There had also been December, a client dinner that ran late, the team dispersing in stages until it was just the 2 of us finishing what was left of a shared dessert neither of us had ordered separately, talking about nothing in particular, her sister's renovation, my rubber plant's improbable survival, a book she'd read twice and couldn't explain why. It was an hour and a half of conversation that had nothing to do with Rendell. I had driven home afterward and sat in my car for 4 minutes before going inside, and I still could not have told you exactly why. And today there had been one moment specifically. In the kitchen, mid-afternoon, she had opened a drawer I pointed her to and found, among pens that didn't work, expired takeout menus, and the accumulated debris of 4 years of living somewhere, a photo strip. Booth kind. Me and my sister from 2 years ago, laughing at something I couldn't remember. She held it and looked at it. "You look happy," she said. "Something was apparently very funny," I said. She held it for another second. Then, without comment, she set it in the box of things being kept rather than the discard pile. She had not been asked to make that decision. She had simply made it. I did not point this out. I was not sure what pointing it out would have solved, except that I would have had to acknowledge I had been watching closely enough to notice, and then she would have known, and we were both still being very deliberate about what we acknowledged. By 7 o'clock, the apartment was down to the bedroom. The bed frame was already disassembled and stacked against the wall. The dresser was wrapped and done. What remained were the linens, the nightstand, the lamp, and the things I had been putting off because packing them felt too much like a door closing. Nadia appeared in the doorway beside me. We both looked at the room. The light had shifted, not the amber kitchen light anymore. This was the early evening blue that arrives before you've noticed night starting. The kind of light where ordinary things look like they might mean something. She went in first. She moved toward the linens while I moved to the nightstand. The bedroom was quieter than the rest of the apartment. No street sounds reached this far back. Or maybe the boxes absorbed them. The only sounds were the slide of cardboard, the slow tear of tape. She folded the fitted sheet with the competence of someone who has lived alone long enough to master the corners without help. I noticed this without intending to, and then stopped noticing it, and then noticed it again. We worked without talking. The space between us was the same distance it always was, physically. It felt different. The kind of different that is difficult to name while it is still happening, but is very clear in retrospect. She went still once, mid-task, for a second too long. I was looking at the nightstand. She was looking at nothing in particular. Then she moved again, as if it hadn't happened. There are things you learn to read in 4 years. The way her jaw set when she was working through a decision. The particular quiet that meant she was paying very close attention to something she hadn't named yet. I had become, without meaning to, fluent in Nadia in the way that people become fluent in things they spend enough time near. I recognized what I was looking at. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. The tape made a slow sound against cardboard. The window dimmed another degree. Somewhere outside, the city was having a Friday evening without either of us in it. The lamp went last. The room dimmed to window light only. She looked around slowly, the way she looked at a project in its final stages, checking for what was missing. Her eyes moved from the stacked bed frame to the bare floor where it had been, to the window, and then to me. I held very still. She did not look away. Then she looked at the bare center of the floor and pointed. "Which side is mine?" She said it with that deliberate flatness. Too practiced. Too casually, the kind of casual that takes preparation, that arrives after a sentence has been sitting inside someone long enough that they have rehearsed the nervousness out of it, and only the question remains. Too clearly. Like her mouth had made a decision her mind had not quite caught up to yet. Like the sentence had been sitting behind her teeth for a long time and had finally found a door. I should have said something immediately. I have been told, by people who understand these moments better than I do, that there is a window, and that the window is narrow, and that the whole point is to say the true thing before you have time to think of a reason not to. I stood very still instead. She heard herself. I watched it happen, the small recalibration in her expression. The way she looked at the wall. "That's a logistics question," she said. "Efficiently, for the new place. Where to position the frame." Her hands had gone completely still, which almost never happened. "It wasn't," I said. A pause. "No," she said quietly. "It wasn't." She looked at the floor. Her fingers tightened once around the roll of tape she was still holding. "You don't have to respond to that," she said. "I want to," I said. I stopped. "Give me a second." She gave me the second. She had never once rushed me. Not in 4 years. "We can leave it," I offered. "We can go get food somewhere and agree the last 10 minutes were about moving logistics. You keep your dignity. I keep pretending I'm fine with how this year ended. That option is available." She looked up. "Is that what you want?" I thought about a coffee from a calf I'd mentioned once. A printed calendar with 3 days blocked. A sentence about the Morrison project she had walked away too fast for me to answer. A photo strip moved from one box to another without comment. "No," I said. "It's not." She breathed out. Something in her shoulders released that I hadn't realized was being held. "I changed your name in my phone 8 months ago." She said it to the floor first, then looked up. It was Calloway, J, before. Correct. Professional, A pause. And then, one day, it was just James and I kept not changing it back because she stopped. Started again. Because every time your name came up, I noticed what it felt like to see it. And I decided what that meant later than I should have. Not because she was dramatic. Because she had simply run out of safer ways to feel it. That landed harder than I expected. I crossed the distance between us. Not fast. Carefully, the way you move towards something you're afraid might change its mind. She didn't move back. "I've left 3 jobs in my life," I said. Every single time I felt the door open ahead of me. I gave notice and was already somewhere else in my head. I looked at her. I gave notice to you in February and spent 6 weeks trying to reconstruct why I'd been so certain it was the right move. It was, she said quietly, the right move. Professionally, yes, I held her gaze. But every time something went right this year, you were the first person I needed to tell. Every time something went wrong, same answer. 4 years. Same answer every time. I stopped. Said the true version. I kept filing that under professional rapport. I was aware, at a certain point, that I was not being honest about what it was. She said nothing. Her eyes were very steady. It was always you, I said. That's what it was. The room was very quiet. I reached for her hand. Carefully, a question, not a statement. She looked down, then back up. She laced her fingers through mine and held on. We stood there in the bare room, in the evening light, surrounded by the flat-packed remnants of a life being moved on from, and it felt absurdly like arriving somewhere rather than leaving. From the kitchen, my phone lit up. Video call. My sister. I had sent her photographs of boxes for 7 hours instead of actual communication, and she had apparently decided that grace period was over. I looked at the phone. I looked at Nadia. You should. She agreed. I answered it. My sister looked at my face, then past my shoulder at the portion of Nadia visible behind me. She was quiet for what I can only describe as a historically unprecedented 3 seconds. Then, that's your boss. She helped me pack, I said. James, she's very good with tape. James, behind me, I could feel Nadia's shoulders shaking. Just slightly. She was covering her mouth. That was the most real smile I had ever seen from her, and I wasn't even facing her, and I knew it anyway. 3 weeks later, she came to the new apartment to help set up the bed. She had a firm opinion about which side was better, closer to the window for the morning light. I had no argument worth raising. We were careful with each other at first. Knew enough that we still noticed the strangeness of it. Her in my kitchen instead of a conference room. A table between us instead of her desk. She brought the coffee. I made the food. We were both still learning how to have a conversation without a project tracking it. We learned faster than I expected. She left the cardigan at my place by accident one evening, the navy one from the back of her office chair, the one she had worn every day for 4 years. When I texted her, she replied, "Keep it. I have another." She did not have another. Nothing important had appeared overnight. It had simply stopped hiding. A year later, at a friend's dinner, someone turned to Nadia and asked the inevitable question, "How did you two meet?" She looked at me. I looked at her. "He was my project coordinator," she said. She had very strong opinions about packing tape, I said at the same time. Both true. Neither of them the answer. The real answer was a bare room in the warehouse district. The wrong colored light, and a woman with a pen behind her ear who had run out of safer ways to say what she meant, and asked a question about a bed that was never really about the bed. She picked the window side, by the way. She is still right about it. What would you have done if your boss pointed at your bed and quietly asked which side was hers? And have you ever had a person in your life who was always the first answer, even before you were willing to admit what the question was? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.